Just a quick review. We have been going chronologically through the Gospels. Last week we were in Matthew chapter number 9. Main lesson from last week is this: we must get rid of those preconceived notions of who is worthy of the gospel. You remember as Jesus walked away from the gathering of healing the paralytic, and there with the crowd, he walks past a tax collector's booth. And the tax collectors were not well liked. In fact, some of those he would have been walking with would have maybe murmured under their breath something about the person in the tax collector's booth. They would have said something negative, maybe even vocally out loud to this person. This person's name was Matthew, and Jesus, whenever he walked by, he didn't say anything under his breath about him. He didn't say anything to him in a mean way. No, he says, "Follow me." He wants Matthew, this person who has been pushed away by society, kind of considered a reject, considered somebody that would be beyond the gospel, beyond reach. Jesus says, "Be my disciple, follow me." So we have to get rid of those preconceived ideas of who is worthy of the gospel. You've got that person, that coworker who is just annoying. As we said last week, if you were given 5 minutes, you still couldn't come up with something good to say about that person. The only thing maybe you could say good about that person is they dressed today, okay? All right? I appreciate the fact that they put on clothes. I can't think of anything else good to say about them. That person is worthy of the gospel every bit as much as you're worthy of the gospel. The reality is that none of us are worthy in and of ourselves. Jesus, when he went to the cross, said you were worthy. Christ died for our sins while we were still sinners. So that was the main lesson from last week. Now, this week's lesson is simple. This week's lesson is simple, but it is powerful. And the main theme of today's message is this: Jesus is not an additive. Jesus is not an additive. He is not something that you just put in as a little bit of extra. You can put it another way. Jesus is not a Band-Aid. Jesus is more like a triage, a complete replacement. So let's read together to see why this theme is going to come up. Verse number 14, again, we've been in Matthew chapter number 9. We finished up in verse 13 last week. We get into verse number 14 and we read this: "Then John's disciples came and asked him, 'How is it that we and the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast?'" That word "your" is just kind of continuing its theme throughout. You remember whenever Jesus is being asked oftentimes, why is it that your disciples don't do this? Why is it that your disciples do this? And so this idea of it being your disciples, Jesus followers, why is it that your disciples don't fast? We fast. The Pharisees' disciples fast. Everybody seems to be fasting, but you don't. Jesus answers this way, verse number 15. "How can the guests of the bridegroom mourn while he was with them? The time will come when the bridegroom will be taken from them, then they will fast." Fasting in those days would have taken on a very somber feel, a very somber look to it. There would have been a certain mourning for their sins, for their transgressions, and that would come along with the fasting. And Jesus says, listen, if you're at a wedding feast, aren't you partying? I don't think you're mourning there. You're not looking somber there. He says, listen, when the bridegroom is here, will the guests mourn? No, of course not. The time will come. So Jesus isn't putting down fasting. He's saying, now's not the time for my disciples to fast. I am here. Check out this, and this is where we're going to hang ourselves the whole time today. Verses 16 and 17. "No one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch will pull away from the garment, making the tear worse." Verse 17, "Neither do men pour new wine into old wineskins. If they do, the skins will burst. The wine will run out, and the wineskins will be ruined. No, they pour new wine into new wineskins, and both are preserved." Simple message today. Ultra simple message today. Jesus is not an additive. It says no one, verse number 16, no one sews a new patch of garment onto an old patch. Now, it seems like they have figured out a way to make fabrics a little bit better than what they used to make them. I can remember growing up as a kid that whenever we ordered shirts, we ordered a size bigger than what we needed, because by the time that it was washed and dried, it would eventually fit, right? Does anybody else remember that time when you looked at, okay, here's what size it is now, here's what size it'll be when it's shrunk, and so I've got to order this size so that I can keep wearing this garment. How many of you remember that time? All right, so a decent number of you, yes. It doesn't seem that today, whenever things are ordered, that is taken into account so much. Again, I don't know if they have figured out a better way to blend the fabrics. Does anybody still take into account shrinkage whenever you're ordering something? One person, two people? Okay, there are a few of you? Okay, all right. Now, this is dangerous. I'll say this about myself rather than someone else. All right, so I don't so much take into account shrinkage as much as growth, okay? So simply say, I'm not saying anything other than that. Those who say they take into account shrinkage, maybe you're really taking into account growth. I'm not sure. I always blame the dryer for shrinking things when I really know that is my growth. But nevertheless, we get the idea that whether previously or whether still currently, fabric, whenever it is washed and then whenever it is dried, it has the tendency to shrink at least to some degree. So I want you to picture this, and here's what's basically being said. If you would take one of those garments that you knew would shrink, and you've got an old one, and so it's been around for years. I still have a shirt from high school that I wear. It's a red shirt. It's almost see-through at this point, but I mean, it has hung on since high school. Every time I wear it, I take a picture of myself. I send it to this lady who was a youth leader of ours in Pennsylvania, because even whenever I wore it all the way back then, she'd be like, "Are you still wearing that shirt?" And so if I put it on, I only wear it like maybe once every 3 months. I'll still take a picture and send it back to Wendy and say, "Hey, I still got my shirt." And then she'll just send me like this, "Oh, I can't believe, look," whatever that would be as an emoji, right? And so like this shirt has been through the ringer. It has been washed and dried and washed and dried. This shirt will not shrink anymore. If there was the need to patch it, and you would put a new piece of cloth on that. Now, because the rest of the garment has already shrunk, if you put a piece that is still going to shrink, what's that going to do? It's going to tear itself away from the old garment. And so what it's saying is this is verse number 16. No one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment. Why? Because if you would, the patch will pull away from the garment. It will start to shrink. And I think you can visualize this, right? If you put this patch on, it's going to shrink. The rest of it won't shrink. So what's it going to do? It's going to tear away from the garment. All right, now, why is Jesus saying this? Why is Jesus saying this? Well, he's just been questioned, why is it that your disciples don't fast? And what he's trying to say is this: putting me as an additive to an old system, the system of the law and sacrifices, is not going to work. I have not come as a little patch for the old system. I haven't. Like, you don't just add me in and then everything else is okay. Now, you remember last week we wrapped up by saying this. We read this, verse 13. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. Jesus has just finished saying, listen, I want to get to the heart of the matter. Mercy is really at the heart of someone. And so listen, you can go through and you can do the sacrifices and you can line yourself up ritualistically. That's not what I want. I want your heart to be changed. I want to make a complete difference in your life. And so when Jesus was saying here, listen, I want you to know we're not going to put a new patch of unshrunk cloth on something that's old. He's basically saying, I'm not here to fix the law. I'm not here to patch it up. The law has served a purpose. The scriptures talk about the law being a schoolmaster to lead you to Christ, right? And so listen, the law served its purpose. And I'm not speaking ill of the law. God instituted the law so that whenever Christ came, the law was to point people to the need for Christ. The law pointed out sin. Said, this is wrong. This causes you to fall short. This is an area in which you do not measure up. You have missed God's holy standard. The law does that perfectly. But whenever Christ comes, he says, listen, I'm not here to just patch that up. I am the system, if you want to say it that way. I am the solution. I am the cure. I alone am the one. You must turn to me. I am going to offer myself as the sacrifice for all sin. And I need you to know this isn't to patch something up. You need me, and you need me completely, and you need me alone. So verse 16 talks about that patch. Verse 17 says, you don't pour new wine into old wineskins. Now, anymore you pour wine into bottles, right? And bottles don't shrink. But whenever they were doing it back then, what would happen is they would pour the wine into a wineskin, actually an animal skin. And what would happen is the fermentation of the wine would cause that to shrink. Now, if you would pour new wine into one that had already shrunk, you know what it's going to do? It's not going to be able to handle that shrinkage anymore, and it's going to break. So you can't put something new into old, is what it's saying once again. Just like you can't put a new patch on an old garment, you also can't put new wine in. It's the same illustration. I, Jesus, have not come to be an additive. I have come to be the solution. The solution. And here's the message today. It's simple. Here's what I need you to be able to take away. And the people in the back are going to be like, I can't believe he's done, because I'm going to be done in about 5 to 7 minutes. And this is crazy, right? But I need you to get this. And when I say 5 to 7 minutes, I really mean 10 to 15. So just relax. Here's the thing. There are so many people in life who want to use Jesus as a patch, who want to use Jesus as an additive. If I add a little bit of Jesus to my life, and it'll just make everything better, right? Like, I know that I'm messed up. I know that things are going wrong, but I'll just add a little Jesus. I'm not gonna like ask Jesus to transform everything. Not gonna give him access to everything. Like, I'll just add a little Jesus. Listen, the solution is not to add a little Jesus. You need Jesus. And whenever you get Jesus, he changes everything. You see, some people, whenever they're facing a problem, they'll say, okay, well, I'll bring in Jesus for this, and then the rest of my life will be unaffected by Jesus. I want you to think about this. Anybody ever seen a gruesome injury? Reasonably gruesome? All right, if you've seen a reasonably gruesome injury, how many of you have seen keep your hands up. All right, now leave them up. How many of you would have suggested, and you can put them down if the answer is no to this, how many of you would have suggested a Band-Aid as a cure for that? Just leave your hands up if you've seen a gruesome injury and you would have used as your solution to the most gruesome injury, your solution is I'll use a Band-Aid. Keep your hand up if that's the case. All right. Nobody has their hand up still. Why? Now, if you would look at my hands, and I know you probably can't see it, I've got a cut that goes from about here all the way down to here. All right, that was a barbed wire that we were using a stretcher on barbed wire, and it let go, and it just, how many of you have ever stretched fence? Anybody? All right. Yeah, so you really don't want that barbed wire to come back. And so that one was from there. This finger here is kind of sliced up through there. I was tossing a piece of wood, and there was a bolt on our trailer, and I caught that bolt, and it just ripped my hand. It was gruesome, gross. The Band-Aid was not a solution for either one of those. I think I could have fixed this one with enough Band-Aids, but that wasn't really the solution. A couple years ago in basketball, NCAA, there was a guy who took a shot, kind of falling away a little bit, and his leg did some things that no leg should probably do. And I'm pretty sure they didn't use a Band-Aid as the solution for that. Now, why is it that we would not use a Band-Aid as a solution for something that is gruesome like that? it's not adequate, right? It's not really what is needed. And I want you to know this. 2 Corinthians chapter number 5 talks about we being dead in our trespasses and sins. Solution for a dead person is probably not a Band-Aid either, right? That would be, maybe some CPR, maybe some life-giving sustenance there, whether you're, and I think that they've maybe revised. I haven't taken a CPR class in a while. I need to do that. But nevertheless, like it used to be, you have your chest compressions and then your breaths. Did they go to just chest compressions? I thought they did. But life-giving remedies are needed whenever someone is dead. Like, kid you not, my first Sunday in Pennsylvania, we had somebody in the service, boom, fell down. Like, literally, their heart stopped beating. I was like, unbelievable, this is a bad sign. Somebody gave CPR. The person lived. But it was necessary to do more than say, hey, I got a first aid kit. Anybody need, hey, can we put a Band-Aid on that? That's not what was needed, and that's not what Jesus did for the law. Jesus says, listen, the law served its purpose. It pointed to the need for a Savior. I am that Savior. If you've been trying to add a little bit of Jesus to just where you think you need him, my guess is this: you have been a little bit frustrated, maybe a lot frustrated. I see this happen over and over and over again. I'll give a little bit of this area of my life because I'm clearly struggling. I'll give that to Jesus, and that'll make a difference, and everything else will be okay because I got everything else under control. No, you don't add a little bit of Jesus. You need Jesus in every area of your life. You need Jesus for your worries. You need Jesus for your fears. You need Jesus for your alcoholism. You need Jesus for your anger. You need Jesus for, and you can just kind of fill in the blank there. You need Jesus in every area of your life. And if you find yourself saying this, well, I'll let Jesus have this area, and I'll let Jesus have this area, it's very possible that you just haven't given your life to Jesus at all. Because when you give your life to Jesus, he gets everything. He gets everything. He is not an additive. And if you've used him as an additive, then you have done yourself and him a disservice. If you said, I'll let him control the places that I go, but not the things that I say, you're using Jesus as an additive. You're using him as a Band-Aid on something that needs serious help. You do realize, if you've come to know Jesus as your Savior, I trust that you realize just how desperate you were without him. I came to know Christ as a teenager, and he saved me from a lot of heartache and a lot of pain. And I still look back and I say all the time, wow, I was so desperately lost without him. I cannot imagine life without Jesus. And I think for a lot of people, you can't imagine doing your finances without Jesus. For a lot of you, you can't imagine deciding the places you go, the things that you say without Jesus. I know that for many of you, and maybe this is what has impressed me so much about the family here at Northwinds, because we don't ever preach Jesus as a little bit of an attitude or additive. We don't ever preach Jesus as just like, we'll use him here for a little while. And so like, I've given you guys so much credit in the past for saying like, you just blow my mind, because over and over and over again, I see the church family here saying, well, if Jesus says that that's the case, then I need to line up with that. Well, if Jesus says that that's the case, then that's just what I got to do. If Jesus says this, then that's just the way that it is. And like, you guys amaze me with that, but that's a good sign that you're not just using Jesus as a little bit of an additive, or Jesus as a little bit of a Band-Aid. So props to you on that. But if you're here today and you've said, well, I've been having a rough week, and so I need to go to church to just be able to get myself on the right track. You don't need to just go to church to kind of get yourself on the right track. You need Jesus on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. You need him all the time. You need him when you wake up. You need him whenever you live your day. You need him whenever you go to bed. You need him at all times. And like this idea that we can segment Jesus into this little time slot between 10 and 11:30 on a Sunday morning is foreign to the concept of why Jesus came. That's like taking a new patch and putting it on an old garment. It rips itself away, and you can live frustrated whenever that's the way that you go about life. And so if you've been doing this idea of like, okay, I got to go to church just to get myself filled up for that period of time, to make myself feel better, to make myself whatever, I need you to know this. You need Jesus all the time. And the whole reason that you're struggling so much is that you're living large portions of your life without him. You're going to be messed up. I mean, pardon me for saying it, but I would be a screwed up individual. I'm already just reasonably screwed up. You guys know that. I'm screwed up with Jesus, like I'm just a little bit crazy and a little bit, but like, to live large portions of your day, large portions of your week, large portions of your month, large portions of your year without Jesus. No wonder you're messed up. And I'm not trying to tell you you're messed up. You already feel that way. If you've been living large portions of your life not allowing Jesus to affect them, you feel messed up. You feel confused. You feel, we sang, our hope is endless. If you're living large portions of your life without Jesus, your hope is not endless. Your hope is almost non-existent because it's like, okay, well, I'm not seeing Jesus. I'm not allowing Jesus to permeate every area of my life. If Jesus doesn't permeate your life when you go to school, teenagers, then you're kind of in an identity crisis. If you're trying to figure out when to live for Jesus and when not to live for Jesus, and what areas of your life he affects, does he affect my sports, or does he only affect my relationships with my friends? Does he affect the way that I do my studies, or does he only affect the way that I relate to my parents? Does he only affect this? And if you're trying to figure out, okay, what parts of my life does Jesus affect, let me just say this. If you happen to write down all the areas of your life on an index card, so let's just say that you wrote down, I'm talking to students right now, but adults, I'll get to you in a moment. So let's just say that you wrote down my studies, my relationship with my parents, my relationship with my siblings, my athletics, whatever it might be. So you write down all the things in your life, and you toss on index cards, and you toss them into a hat. So here's the way that this doesn't work. You don't reach in, pick one out, and say, okay, Jesus affects that. You just toss your hat in and say, okay, Jesus affects all of that. Now, adults, it's much easier to think about how this should affect your kids, but adults, I want you to think about this. You start writing down the areas of your life. I go to work, my interaction with my coworkers, the quality of my work while I'm at work, my finances, my relationship with my spouse, my relationship with my kids, how I use my time. You start to write down all the things that are a part of your life, and you put those on index cards, and you toss those in the hat. We are not picking one out and deciding, okay, yes, Jesus, you can have control of this. We are also not picking one out, looking at it, not that one, not that one. No, we are taking the entire hat, we're putting a lid on it, and we're saying, okay, Jesus, you get all of this. Now, you know what's really freeing about that? It might seem like, oh, Pastor Dave, you're asking me to do something really difficult. Do you know how hard it is to live a double life? If you're trying to figure out what areas of life Jesus gets to affect, you know how complicated that is? It's no wonder that it's like, whoa, I feel like I'm pulled in all different directions. No. Jesus, when he's talking to John's disciples who ask him, why don't your disciples fast like the Pharisees and my disciples do? Well, I'm not here to like put a little patch, a new patch on an old garment that it just wouldn't work. I'm not here to put new wine into old wineskins. We're not keeping some of the old and some of the new. No, I need to have everything. I am the solution. I'm not an additive. I should have never been an additive to you. I should always be the solution. So every part of your life gets released to Jesus. And it's freeing because you don't even have to decide. How many of you, just out of curiosity, and this can go husbands and wives, this can go across family boundaries to children and stuff. How many of you, whenever it comes to deciding what restaurant to go to, spend some time, well, where do you want to go? I don't know. Where do you want to go? Like, well, where do you, how many of you do that? A decent number of you. How many of you have a reasonably well-established, like, okay, well, either the husband usually decides or the wife. How many of you have that kind of figured out and you don't spend all that time? Okay, let me ask you this. How many of, since nobody has that figured out, neither do I, how many of you have ever gotten frustrated with that process of like, hey, where do you want to go? Where do you want to go? Has that ever been frustrating? And how many of you, because it's frustrating, end up not going anywhere? Yeah, like it's just like, hey, where do you want? I don't know. Where do you want to go? I don't know. And like, okay, well, I don't really care. Well, what are you in the mood for? I don't know. Well, are you in the mood for Mexican? I don't know. Are you in the mood for Italian? I don't know. I almost feel like I could eat anything. Well, why don't we just go to Wendy's? No, I don't really feel like Wendy's. And so it can be so frustrating, this decision process. And can you imagine this? Like, well, are we gonna submit? Well, you're talking now as a family, maybe as a husband and a wife. Or are we gonna submit our finances to the Lord? Well, I don't know. Like, we maybe should. And, well, let's go ahead and do that. No, I don't know that we're ready. And well, what about our attitudes? Sometimes we lose our cool with the kids. Like, should we submit that to the Lord? Like, should we ask Him to affect that area of our lives? Well, yeah, but I mean, our kids need to know that I'm upset with. Yeah, but I mean, like, a lot of times we discipline in anger, and so like we don't want to be doing that. So we should probably ask the Lord to affect that area of our lives. Yeah, you're right. And then you lose your cool again, and it's like, well, but what did you expect? Like, and you say, okay, I'm going to release just every area of my life to the Lord. And so when I wake up tomorrow morning, tomorrow is the Lord's day. I know a lot of times we talk about Sundays being the Lord's day. Every day is His day. And so you wake up tomorrow morning and you say, okay, you got this visualization. I'm not using Jesus as an additive. I'm not just putting a little patch on a little problem. No. I need like the entire triage unit. He needs to affect every area of my life. And there's great freedom in that. Whenever I first came to know the Lord, I think I've shared this with you. I had an anger problem. And in addition to having an anger problem, I had a language problem. And it was one of those things where every time that I would slip up and lose my temper, I'd be like, Lord, I need you to fix this area of my life. I need you to. Like, He had already impressed on me, but I can't fix it myself. And so I had two options at this point. That's just the way that I am. Or it's like, Jesus, I need you to overwhelm that area. Jesus, I need you to overwhelm that area. And just repeatedly, Jesus, I give this area to Jesus. I need you to fix this. Jesus, I don't want this to be a part of my life. Jesus. And so, like, don't get frustrated if you wake up tomorrow and you go to your workplace and you lose your temper with a coworker. At the moment you lose your temper, Lord, I need you to affect this area. I need you to affect the way that I interact with this coworker. I need you to affect every area of my life. So Jesus isn't an additive, and He's not a Band-Aid. We're not putting a new piece on something that's old because it'll just pull away and it's not going to work. We're not putting new wine into old wineskins. It would just cause it to burst. It just isn't that way. No, Jesus is the solution. Father, thank you for your word. Thank you for the clarity of it. I know for many in here, maybe this message is something that they've already implemented in their life. Maybe they've already said, okay, I'm not going to keep any area from you. I'm not going to keep my relationship with my spouse from you. I'm not going to keep my relationship with my kids from you. I'm not going to keep my temper from you. I'm not going to keep my language from you. I'm not going to keep my compassion from you. I'm not going to keep my attitude from you. I'm not going to keep my finances from you. I'm not going to keep, and just whatever that is. Look, it's so easy. It's so freeing. I shouldn't say easy, Lord, because you know that for us to release some of these things is not easy. But it is freeing when the decision has already been made. The decision is, Lord, you get everything. You get everything. And so for those who are having a hard time releasing some of those areas, whether it be their time, their treasure, their talents, their family, whatever it might be, God, you know their hearts, and they know themselves. God, I pray that today your word changes lives. You're the solution. You're not an additive. May we remember that not just this week, but all our lives long. In Jesus' name.